We're going to take a look here at Chapter 6, which goes over demand, supply, equilibrium, and welfare analysis. Demand is a downward sloping line and really just represents consumers in the economy. This downward sloping demand line is plotted on the graph that has a vertical axis of price and a horizontal axis of quantity demanded. There's an inverse relationship between prices and quantity demanded. This should seem logical. If we look at the Coca-Cola, we can see that if the price of Coca-Cola increases, then people or consumers are going to buy less of the Coca-Cola. They're going to demand less of a quantity. If the price of Coca-Cola drops, the quantity demanded of Coca-Cola increases. Quantity demanded is a specific point on the demand line. Demand is nothing more than an infinite number of those quantity demanded points. Down here, we just have a demand schedule which plots out the points or data that would be on the supply and demand graph. Demand has the ability to move. We can see that all of demand could increase if it would shift to the right. A decrease is a leftward shift of demand. Demand is moved by these factors over here. Again, this should all seem logical. If someone's income increases, you would be able to afford to buy more products even if the price of the product has not changed. If the price of a substitute were to go up, say Pepsi being a substitute of Coca-Cola, if Pepsi were to increase in price, then the quantity demanded of Pepsi would drop. If people buy less Pepsi, then they're going to demand more Coke, the substitute, even though the price of Coke has not changed. There's a decrease in price of a complement. Complements are things that you use in conjunction with each other. Ice is a complement to Coke, but a better example would be that of an iPhone chargers. If the price of iPhones were to drop significantly, then the quantity demanded of iPhones would increase. People buy more iPhones, so they're going to have to buy more iPhone chargers. They're going to have to demand more iPhone chargers, even though the price of the iPhone charger has not changed. If something becomes more popular because of advertisements or celebrity endorsements, people will buy more of the product, even though the price hasn't changed. If consumers think that the price will increase in the near future, they'll go ahead and stockpile and demand a lot more of this item right now before the price goes up. And lastly, if demographics change, if there's a greater amount of population, there's more people, there'll be more demand for these items. This is all for what are considered to be normal goods. If the good is inferior, there's an inverse relationship between its income and demand. Inferior goods you can think of as being like generic goods versus name brand. The inferior generic goods, as someone's income increases, the demand for those generic goods will decrease. Next, we're going to take a look at supply. Supply is that of the producer. It is the businesses making those products. Supply is plotted on the same graph with price on the vertical axis and quantity being produced on the horizontal axis. As the price increases for the item, businesses are willing to allocate more of their resources towards the production of that item. Remember, there are 4 factors of production. Land, which are the natural resources. In this case, for Coca-Cola, a natural resource could be water or sugar, or even the oil that's used to help distribute and manufacture the Coca-Cola. Workers are the laborers. Machines, tools, and equipment is known as capital. The bottling machines, the machines that press out the plastic, and then entrepreneurial ability is the last element there. If a business is showing that their prices of their goods and services are going up. If people are willing to pay more for that item, then the business is willing to allocate more of their resources towards the production of that item. Coca-Cola makes not only Coke, but they also make Dasani water. Dasani water is also going to use the same plastic and bottling tools and the same workers and water as well. If Coca-Cola cannot sell Coke for a high price, they will simply allocate those resources towards the production of Dasani. If they can sell the Coke for a higher price, they will allocate more resources towards the production of Coke. Quantity supplied, again, is just a specific point on the supply curve. There's a direct relationship between price and quantity supplied. This is a supply schedule, which just gives you the data over here. Supply also has the ability to shift. This is an example of a rightward shift of supply, an increase. A decrease would be a leftward shift. If the cost of production were to drop and it was now cheaper to manufacture, businesses would produce more of the item. Ways that the cost of production could go down is if resource costs were to drop. For example, these input costs such as the cost of the labor, the cost of the oil, or the cost of the natural resources. If business taxes were to go down and the government was charging less money, or if the government was increasing its subsidies and giving money to these businesses, these things would cause a drop in the cost of production, allowing businesses to produce more even at the same price. If there is an increase in technology or an increase in education of the workers, also known as human capital, this would help increase productivity and speed up the manufacturing process. If there was an increase in the number of suppliers, businesses again would be able to supply more. And lastly, if there's an increase in capital, those tools and equipment and machines, if we have more factories, we'll be able to supply more. We're going to now go ahead and plot supply and demand on the same graph. So we have that demand downward sloping line representing consumers and supply, the upward sloping line representing producers. Price on that vertical axis and quantity on the horizontal axis. The intersection of these two lines represents the equilibrium. At the equilibrium, everyone who wants one can get one. In this case, we have an equilibrium price of $3 and a quantity of 200. If the price was set at above the equilibrium, we would create a surplus. If, for example, the price was set at $4, you would have a demand of 100 units, but a supply of 400 units, thus creating a surplus or extra of 300. In order to eliminate a surplus, a business could simply drop the price. If the price was below the equilibrium at, say, $2 or $1, there would be a shortage. Demand would be greater than that of supply. Here we're going to demonstrate what happens if supply or demand were to increase. Here we have our equilibrium price of $3 and equilibrium quantity of 200 at demand 1 and supply 1. But if supply increases and causes this rightward shift, maybe from a drop in labor costs or increase of technology, lower business taxes, or whatever example, if supply increases, if there's a greater amount of these objects and they become less rare, it should logically cost less to acquire them, so prices drop. As prices drop, it is a signal to consumers to buy more. As prices drop, the quantity demanded of these items increase, so quantity goes up. If supply were to remain constant and demand were to increase from any of these topics down here, you would see that as demand increases, it is a signal to producers that they can charge more for their product because of the increase in demand. As prices increase, businesses are willing to allocate more resources towards the production of that item, and they increase quantity output. As demand increases, this leads to an increase in price and an increase in quantity. Lastly, we have producer surplus and consumer surplus. Consumer surplus is that feeling you get when you buy something that's on sale and you feel like you got a great deal. Say, for example, we're buying some pair of pants. The pants are being sold at an equilibrium price of $20, but you like them so much that you would have been willing to pay $25 or even $30 for them. Because of this, you feel like you got a great deal. This is known as your consumer surplus. Remember, all the units of these items are being sold at the same equilibrium price of $20. So 100 units are being produced, 100 units are being demanded at $20. 99 of those units, for 99 of those units, individuals would have been willing to pay a higher price. All this green area in here represents that consumer surplus. Producers have the same surplus. These producers would have been willing to produce those 100 pants and sell them at a lower price for 99 of them. But they didn't have to. Even if they're willing to make 25 units and sell them at $10, all of the units were actually sold at $20. This area in here represents the producer's surplus. The supply represents the marginal cost. The demand represents the marginal benefit. As long as people perceive that they're getting a greater benefit than how much the item costs, they're going to produce it. And they're going to buy it. Maximum welfare efficiency occurs when your marginal cost equals your marginal benefit. That's all, guys. Thanks.